This is the brainless fool we'll have to deal with. That's how my daughter's fiancé introduced me to his family at the wedding. Everyone laughed, enjoying my humiliation. But when his mother recognized me, her face turned pale with shock. She fell to her knees and begged, "Sir, please forgive us." Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. 47 minutes. My daughter's engagement ring caught the candlelight as she made her 12th excuse for him. The Blue Heron's maitre d' had stopped asking if we needed more time. Even the waiter avoided our table now, circling like a vulture who sensed the death of good manners but didn't want to intrude. Monica twisted her napkin into shapes I recognized from her childhood. The same nervous habit from piano recitals and spelling bees. "Traffic from Manhattan can be brutal on Friday nights," she offered. Though we both knew Brandon worked in Princeton, 15 minutes away. I watched the entrance over her shoulder. Every couple that walked through made her straighten, then slump. The ice in my water had melted twice. The breadbasket sat untouched, its contents growing cold like my patience. At 7:47, he strutted through the door. No rush in his step, no apologetic hunch to his shoulders. Brandon Carter moved through the restaurant like he owned it, stopping to check his reflection in the wine display. His suit probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Charcoal gray, perfectly tailored with a pocket square that matched nothing because matching was apparently beneath him. He slid into his chair without a word of apology, just snapped his fingers at a passing server. "Lobster thermidor. And whatever wine pairs with that, something decent, not the house swill." Monica's hand found his. "We haven't ordered yet, honey. We were waiting." "Well, I'm here now." He finally looked at me, a lazy assessment that started at my navy blazer and ended at my reading glasses. "Nice to finally meet you, Chief." Chief, not Marcus, not Mr. Washington, Chief. "Brandon." I extended my hand. His grip was deliberately crushing, held a second too long. "Monica's told me about your work in your family's business." "Yeah, someone's got to run the empire." He laughed at his own comment. "Monica says you work in courts?" "I work in the judicial system." His phone buzzed. Without hesitation, he answered it. "Yeah? No. Tell them the permit's their problem. We delivered on time." He held up one finger to me. "Wait," while continuing his conversation. "Fine, offer them 10% off the next project, but make it clear this is a one-time courtesy." Monica's smile had fossilized. I catalogued every second, every dismissive gesture, every moment he treated this meeting like an inconvenience between more important things. When he finally ended the call, he didn't apologize. Instead, he flagged down the waiter. "We're ready. The lady will have the salmon. She always gets salmon here." He hadn't asked her. "And you, Pops?" "Pops. I'll have the ribeye," I said evenly. "Good choice. Though on a government salary, you probably don't get to enjoy places like this often." He winked at Monica. "Good thing your daughter's marrying up, right?" Monica's laugh was hollow. "Brandon, Dad's not just, so basically a paper pusher?" Brandon interrupted, not even letting Monica finish. "I mean, filing documents, processing paperwork, keeping the wheels of justice creaking along, right?" He signaled the sommelier. "Bring us your best Bordeaux, the good stuff from the reserve list." "Brandon, that's incredibly expensive," Monica started. "Relax, baby. Your old man's been saving for this moment your whole life, haven't you, Chief?" He didn't wait for my answer. "Besides, Monica deserves to celebrate properly. Not everyone gets to join the Carter family." The way he said it, like she'd won a lottery, not fallen in love. Like my daughter was lucky to be chosen by this man who couldn't even show up on time to meet her father. "Tell me about these wedding plans," I said, steering us towards safer ground. "Mom's handling everything. She's got connections at the plaza. Though between you and me," he leaned in conspiratorially, "I think Monica's guest list is a bit modest. I mean, her side's what, 20 people? We have a small family," Monica said quietly. "Nothing wrong with that, baby. Just means more room for the people who matter. The governor's already RSVP'd, both senators too. Dad doesn't build half the state's infrastructure without making friends." Our food arrived. Brandon had ordered a second lobster for the table without asking. He dissected it while talking, spraying butter with each animated gesture. "The thing about Monica is she needs someone who can elevate her. Sure, she's smart, law degree and all that, but intelligence without connections is just wasted potential." "Monica graduated summa cum laude from Columbia," I said. Right, great school, but you know what they say. It's not what you know, it's who you know." He pointed his fork at me. "That's probably why you're stuck in, what is it exactly that you do? Court clerk? Bailiff?" "I work with judges," I said carefully. "So basically a paper pusher?" He laughed, loud enough that other diners turned. "No offense, Chief, but that explains a lot. Monica told me you raised her alone after her mom died. Must have been tough on a clerk's salary. No wonder she's so driven, trying to compensate, you know. Monica's eyes were pleading with me. Don't make a scene. Don't ruin this. Be happy for me. The thing is, Brandon continued, warming to his theme, Monica's got potential. With the right guidance, the right connections, she could be more than just another lawyer grinding away at some firm. She could be someone's wife which is why she needs someone who actually provides, not just financially but socially, opens doors, makes introductions. You understand, right? I understood perfectly. Every word was a calculated insult wrapped in condescension. The check arrived. Brandon made a performance of it, pulling out a black American Express like he was unsheathing a sword. This one's on me, Chief. Consider it a down payment on taking your daughter off your hands. He tossed $500 bills on the table for the tip. The gesture was violent in its casualness. More money than some people made in a day, thrown down like loose change. Shall we? He stood without waiting, already heading for the door. Monica gathered her purse slowly. Dad, please, we should talk, I said quietly. We are talking. Alone. Brandon's my fiancé. Whatever you need to say. Come on, people, Brandon called from the entrance. The valet's got my car. The March air bit through my jacket as we exited. Brandon's Bentley sat in the handicapped spot, hazard lights blinking like a claim of ownership over rules that applied to others. The valet looked apologetic as he handed over the keys. Mr. Carter insisted, Course I did. I'm not walking across some parking lot like a peasant. Brandon pressed a 20 into the kid's hand. Monica, let's go. Early meeting tomorrow. I stepped between them. Monica, 5 minutes. Dad, what could you possibly? Your father's just protective, baby? Brandon's arm snaked around her waist, pulling her against him. Happens when parents realize their kids have outgrown them. My mom went through the same thing when she figured out I didn't need her picking out my clothes anymore. This is different, I said. Is it? His smile was all teeth. Look, Pops, I get it. Single dad, only daughter. You've been her whole world. But that's changing. She's got me now. I'll take good care of her. Better than a government salary ever could. Money isn't everything, said like someone who's never had any. He opened the passenger door for Monica. We've got a 10:30 tea time tomorrow at the country club. Monica's learning golf. Important for the wives to know the game. Isn't that right, baby? Monica looked between us. I saw her mother in her face then. The same expression Linda wore when choosing between difficult options, trying to keep peace while standing her ground. But Linda never had to choose between me and someone else. We were always on the same side. Dad, why can't you just be happy for me? The question hung in the cold air. Brandon's smirk widened. That's what I've been asking, he said. Man works his whole life, raises a daughter alone, probably sacrificed everything. And this is the thanks. Questions and suspicion, instead of gratitude that she found someone who can provide the life you never could. Brandon, stop. Monica's voice was small. I'm defending you, baby. Someone has to. He looked at me over the car roof. Here's the thing, Chief. I don't need your blessing. Monica's a grown woman. She makes her own choices, and she chose me. Now you can either get on board, or you can keep pushing and lose her completely. Your call. Monica, I tried once more. She slid into the passenger seat. I'll call you next week, Dad. That's my girl, Brandon said, closing her door. He walked around to the driver's side, paused. Oh, and Chief, the engagement party's at our estate, April 5th. Try to dress appropriately. It's not a courthouse. People will actually care what you look like. The Bentley's engine purred to life. Through the window, I saw Monica's profile. Her face turned away. Brandon peeled out of the handicapped spot, tires squealing slightly, just enough to make a point. I stood in the parking lot, watching the taillights disappear into Princeton's manicured streets. Other diners moved around me, heading to their cars, their normal Friday nights continuing while mine had cracked down the middle. My hand found my phone in my pocket, not to call Monica, she wouldn't answer now, but to make notes. Brandon Carter, Carter family, construction, government connections, the governor, both senators. Sir, the valet appeared at my elbow. Should I bring your car? In a moment, I looked at the handicapped spot Brandon had vacated. The sign stood there, blue and white, a symbol of rules and consideration for others. Behind it, a security camera pointed down at the space. Everything was recorded. Everything left evidence. Brandon Carter thought he was untouchable. Men like him always did. They mistook politeness for weakness, careful words for ignorance. He had no idea who I was, what I did, what I was capable of within the boundaries of law. But he would learn. The valet still hovered. Sir, your car? Yes, I said. Bring it around. As I waited, I typed a single note into my phone. Carter Construction. Start with public records. The drive home to Trenton would take 23 minutes. Enough time to plan, enough time to begin. Monica had chosen her side tonight. She'd made that clear. But choices based on incomplete information weren't real choices at all. And Brandon Carter, with his black card and his Bentley and his casual cruelty, had information he hadn't shared. I was certain of it. Men who parked in handicapped spaces always had other violations. Men who threw money around like weapons always had bloody hands. Men who called judges paper pushers always had papers they didn't want pushed into the light. My Honda Accord pulled up, 11 years old, meticulously maintained, completely paid for. The valet held the door. "Have a good evening, sir. It's just beginning," I said, and meant it. The third article confirmed the pattern. Government contracts always followed campaign donations. I sat back from my laptop, rubbing my eyes. The blue light of the screen was the only illumination in my Trenton apartment at 9 p.m. on March 20th, 5 days after that dinner. Carter Construction had won $30 million in state contracts over the past 3 years. Every single one came within 6 months of a significant contribution to someone's campaign. The donations were always just under the limit that triggered enhanced scrutiny. Smart, but not smart enough to avoid creating a pattern visible to anyone who knew where to look. The FBI had opened an investigation in 2019, closed without charges. The SEC launched an inquiry in 2021, also abandoned. Each time, key witnesses had either recanted or relocated. One had died in a car accident that nobody called suspicious because nobody was looking. My doorbell rang. Monica stood in the hallway, fury radiating from every line of her body. She didn't wait for an invitation, pushing past me into the apartment. "How dare you? Hello to you too. Brandon told me what you've been doing, calling his father's office, requesting documents, digging into his family." I closed the door slowly, giving myself time to think. "Who told Brandon? Does it matter? You're investigating my fiancé's family like they're criminals." I made some inquiries. "You pulled court records. You contacted the licensing board. Brandon's father has friends everywhere, Dad." They told him immediately. She paced my living room like a caged animal. "Do you have any idea how humiliating this is? My father sneaking around trying to dig up dirt on the man I love? Monica, there are things you should know." "No." She whirled on me. "There are things you should know. Brandon loves me. His family has welcomed me. They're giving me opportunities I never dreamed of. And you're trying to destroy it all because what? Because he was late to dinner? Because he has money? Because he has a pattern of success, of achievement. Everything you never accomplished he has, and you can't stand it." The accusation stung more than Brandon's insults. "This isn't about me. Isn't it? You drove away David because he wasn't ambitious enough. You found problems with Michael because he was too ambitious. And now Brandon, who's perfect, who loves me, who can give me everything, him you're investigating like he's some criminal mastermind. Look at these articles." I gestured to my laptop. "Just look. I don't want to see your conspiracy theories." She backed away from the computer like it was contaminated. "You know what Brandon said? He said you'd do this. Said you'd try to sabotage us because you can't let go. And I defended you. I said my father would never do that. But here you are, proving him right. Monica, please. 20 minutes. Just look at what I've found. What you've found is a successful family that builds things, creates jobs, contributes to society. Unlike someone who spent 30 years pushing papers in a courthouse." There it was, Brandon's words coming from my daughter's mouth. "Is that what he tells you? That I'm just a paper pusher? Aren't you?" Her voice cracked. "You go to your office. You come home. You've never built anything, never created anything, never risked anything, and now you want to tear down people who have." I moved to my desk, pulled out a folder. In 2019, Carter Construction was accused of using substandard materials in a school construction project. The whistleblower, a foreman named James Torres, died in a single car accident 2 weeks before he was scheduled to testify. Accidents happen. In 2021, they won a no-bid contract for the Riverside Bridge renovation. The inspector who questioned the bidding process was transferred to Alaska. People transfer all the time. "Monica, there's a pattern. The only pattern is you destroying my relationships." Tears ran down her face now. "Mom would be ashamed of you." The words hit like a physical blow. I sat down heavily. "Your mother would want you safe." "I am safe. I'm engaged to a wonderful man from a good family. The only danger to my happiness is you and your paranoid investigations." She pulled out her phone, showed me a photo. Her and Brandon at some charity gala, both glowing, both beautiful. "This is my life now, Dad. Galas and opportunities and a future bigger than I imagined. Can't you just be happy for me?" "What if I'm right?" I asked quietly. "What if the Carters are everything I suspect? Then prove it in court." "Oh wait. You can't, because you're not a prosecutor or a detective or anything important. You're just a clerk who's watched too many crime shows and thinks he sees patterns where there's only success." She headed for the door, paused with her hand on the knob. "The engagement party is April 5th. Brandon's parents are hosting it at their estate. 200 guests. The governor will be there, the senator, everyone who matters in New Jersey. Monica, try to pretend you're happy for me. Wear your best suit. The one from Mum's funeral should work. And Dad, if you continue this investigation, if you embarrass me or Brandon again, I'll never forgive you. Never." What if I'm right? I asked again. She looked at me over her shoulder, her mother's eyes in a face set with Brandon's influence. The manila folder landed on my desk with the weight of inevitability. I hadn't even opened it when my secretary mentioned the name. Judge Washington, the Carter construction case, high profile. 13 days had passed since Monica stormed out of my apartment. 13 days of checking her social media for wedding updates, seeing photos of cake tastings and dress fittings. 2 missed calls from her that I hadn't returned. Not yet. Not until I knew whether my suspicions were paranoia or prophecy. The folder was thick, thicker than most cases that crossed my desk. My fingers traced the label, Carter Construction versus State of New Jersey. Below it, a case number that would soon consume my thoughts, 2025 CV 1847. Inside, $50 million worth of accusations sprawled across depositions and evidence logs. The systematic nature of it took my breath away. Government contracts from 2019 to 2024, each one a masterpiece of manipulation. Shell companies in Delaware with names like Atlantic Infrastructure Partners and Garden State Development LLC. The prosecutors had done their homework, bank records, email chains, recorded conversations. Page after page revealed the anatomy of fraud. Highway projects billed at 3 times actual cost. Phantom workers on payroll who never existed. Materials purchased but never delivered. And at the center of it all, Richard Carter's signature on every document. My secretary knocked. "Your 2 o'clock cancelled. Should I?" "Close the door, Janet. Hold all calls." The testimonies from former employees were damaging. Workers who'd been told to falsify timesheets, accountants pressured to create duplicate invoices, a foreman, not James Torres, he was already dead, who'd photographed substandard materials being used in a school renovation, the same school where a ceiling had collapsed last year, injuring 3 children. The phone on my desk seemed to pulse with Monica's contact information. I could call her, warn her, tell her everything. But what would I say? That her future father-in-law was facing 20 years in federal prison, that the empire Brandon bragged about was built on taxpayer theft and children's blood, that I'd been assigned the very case that would destroy the family she was marrying into. I picked up the phone, put it down, picked it up again. The ethical guidelines were clear. I should recuse myself. Personal connection to the parties involved. Potential conflict of interest. Any other judge would have already filed the paperwork. But any other judge hadn't sat through Brandon's contempt, hadn't watched him pull Monica away like property, hadn't seen the pattern of corruption dressed up as success. "Justice doesn't choose sides," I said to the empty office. The words Linda used to say when I'd come home frustrated by cases where the guilty walked free on technicalities. She'd pour me coffee and remind me that the law was bigger than any one case, any one criminal, any one judge's feelings. But Linda never had to watch her daughter marry into a crime family. The next document was a financial analysis. Carter Construction's reported revenue versus actual bank deposits. The discrepancies were staggering. 50 million was just what they could prove. The real number was likely double that. I turned to the photographs. Richard Carter at ribbon cuttings, groundbreakings, charity galas. Always smiling, always shaking hands with politicians who later received generous campaign contributions. In one photo from last year's governor's ball, Brandon stood beside his father. That same smirk I'd seen at dinner plastered across his face. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for July 28th, after the wedding, after Monica would already be Mrs. Carter, after it would be too late to walk away without scandal, without questions, without the kind of damage that followed political families forever. My finger hovered over Monica's contact. One call, one conversation, one chance to save her from becoming collateral damage in the Carter's collapse. But she'd made her position clear. Any more interference, and she'd never forgive me. She'd chosen Brandon, chosen his family, chosen their version of success over my paranoid conspiracy theories. The prosecution's case was solid. They had documents, witnesses, financial records. What they needed was a judge who wouldn't be intimidated by the Carter family's connections. A judge who'd see through the expensive lawyers and political pressure. A judge who understood that justice sometimes meant destroying dynasties built on lies. I closed the folder but kept my hand on it, feeling the weight of what it contained. Richard Carter's photo stared up at me from a newspaper clipping, paper-clipped to the cover. He was cutting a ribbon at a new highway interchange, one of the projects detailed in the fraud charges. Standing beside him in the photo, partially visible, was Brandon. Same suit, same smile, same casual arrogance that assumed the world would always bend to accommodate Carter ambitions. My phone buzzed. Monica, a text this time. "Final fitting tomorrow. Wish you could be happy for me." I looked from the phone to the case file, from my daughter's plea to the evidence of her future family's crimes. Between love and law, between father and judge, between letting her make her own mistakes and protecting her from mistakes that could destroy her life. The cursor on my phone blinked next to Monica's name. One call, one warning, one violation of judicial ethics that could end my career but might save my daughter. 6 weeks later, the Hyatt's valet took my keys with the same dismissive glance Brandon had perfected at our first meeting. The young man's eyes swept over my 11-year-old Honda, then up to my face, calculating whether I was guest or interloper. The decision took him 3 seconds too long. Washington, I said, for the Carter-Washington wedding. His entire demeanor shifted. Of course, sir. Bride's side? Always the bride's side. Never the father of the bride. Never Judge Washington. Though he wouldn't know that title anyway. Just another relative at another society wedding, tolerated because DNA required it. The 6 weeks since I'd received the case file had been an exercise in compartmentalization. Days in court maintaining neutrality, while the Carter evidence burned in my locked desk drawer. Evenings dodging Monica's calls about boutonniere colors and processional music. Nights lying awake, counting down to this moment when all the lies would converge under one roof. 3 encounters with Brandon had marked those weeks like bloody scratches. First, the rehearsal dinner on April 25th. Brandon had seated me at what he called Monica's table, translation, the table for her other relatives. A great aunt from Baltimore who couldn't hear, cousins from Chicago who'd spent the evening discussing real estate prices. Meanwhile, Brandon's college friends occupied the table next to the wedding party, their laughter drowning out the string quartet. Then came May 3rd, Brandon's bachelor party weekend in Atlantic City. Monica had called, crying, because Brandon had explicitly told her I wasn't invited. "It's for successful young men only," he'd said. "Your dad would feel out of place." The words had come through her tears like poison wrapped in pity. The final insult arrived May 10th. Monica, trying to bridge the divide, had suggested adding 3 of my colleagues to the guest list. Brandon's response, delivered through Monica of course, was surgical. "We're already stretching the venue capacity with people who matter. Maybe next time." Next time. As if there would be another wedding. As if this wasn't Monica's one chance at the fairy tale she'd dreamed of since Linda's death. The Hyatt's lobby stunned with its transformation. Orchids cascaded from every surface. White, pink, deep purple. The flowers alone probably cost more than my annual mortgage payments. Crystal chandeliers had been brought in specially, their light fracturing into rainbows that danced across marble floors polished to mirror brightness. A display near the entrance showcased the happy couple's journey. Photos from their first date, their trip to Paris, Brandon's elaborate proposal at the Met. In every image, Monica glowed while Brandon performed happiness like an actor who'd memorized his marks. The seating chart stood on a gold easel. I found my name quickly. Table 12, back corner. Excellent view of the service exit. The tables nearest the head table read like a who's who of New Jersey politics. The governor at table 2, both senators at table 3, and at table 7, a name that made my stomach clench. Patricia Morse, federal prosecutor. We'd worked together before. She knew exactly who I was. "Marcus," I turned to find Monica's friend Sarah, one of the bridesmaids, looking harried in lavender taffeta. "Monica wants to see you. She's in the bridal suite." The walk through the hotel felt like swimming upstream against a current of wealth. Diamond necklaces caught light like captured stars. Rolex watches ticked on wrists that had never known calluses. The men wore tuxedos that cost more than most Americans' monthly salaries, while their wives displayed jewelry that could fund schools. The bridal suite door was cracked open. Inside, Monica stood before a full-length mirror, while a seamstress made final adjustments to her dress. The gown was everything she'd dreamed of. Ivory silk that seemed to flow like water. Delicate beading that caught the light. A train that would sweep behind her like a queen's cape. She saw me in the mirror. Our eyes met. For a moment I glimpsed my little girl playing dress-up in Linda's old clothes, declaring she'd marry a prince someday. "You came," she said. "Did you think I wouldn't?" "Brandon said—" She stopped. Even on her wedding day, she was editing his words, softening his edges. "He wasn't sure you'd be comfortable." "I'm here for you, always have been." The seamstress excused herself. Monica turned from the mirror, and I saw the full effect. She was breathtaking. Linda would have cried. "Do I look okay?" "You look perfect, baby." Brandon's parents haven't seen the dress yet. They wanted to be surprised. She smoothed invisible wrinkles. "They've been so generous. This entire wedding, the honeymoon in Bora Bora, the down payment on our house, they've insisted on covering everything, with money stolen from taxpayers, with funds that should have built safe schools and solid bridges. But I couldn't say that, not today, not when she stood there glowing with a happiness I was about to shatter. Just not yet, not until the moment was right. "I should go find my seat," I said. "Dad," she caught my arm, "please be nice to them, the Carters. I know Brandon can be difficult, but his parents are good people. They've welcomed me like a daughter. like a daughter, not like the daughter of the judge who would decide their fate. The ballroom doors opened to reveal 300 guests finding their places. The string quartet had been replaced by a full orchestra. Ice sculptures spelled out B and M in letters taller than a man. The flowers here made the lobby look sparse. Entire trees of cherry blossoms, gardens of roses, walls of wisteria. Table 12 was exactly where I'd expected. My companions included Monica's hairdresser, the woman who'd taught her piano, and 3 cousins who'd driven up from Delaware. We had an excellent view of the kitchen doors and a partially obstructed angle on the altar. The orchestra began the processional. The wedding party entered in choreographed perfection, Brandon's groomsmen strutting like peacocks. Then Brandon himself, adjusting his cufflinks as he walked, scanning the crowd like a politician counting votes. The music shifted. Everyone stood, and Monica appeared. Brandon's finger pointed at me like he was identifying a stain on the carpet. His parents had just entered, Richard in a white tuxedo that seemed to glow, Victoria in a dress that probably cost more than my car. They moved through the crowd like royalty, accepting air kisses and handshakes until Brandon's gesture stopped them cold. He leaned close to his mother, whispering just loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. His father's eyes found me across the room. Victoria's hand went to her pearls, a gesture I'd later learned she made when calculating social damage. The orchestra was playing something soft and classical, but the music seemed to fade as more heads turned my direction. Brandon's whisper had become a conversation. His conversation had drawn an audience, and his audience was waiting for a punchline. It came with brutal efficiency. "Mom, Dad, see that guy in the cheap suit?" Brandon's voice carried across the ballroom with practiced projection. "That's the mindless sheep we'll have to endure. Monica's father." The laughter started at the Carter table. Richard's business partners picked it up first, then their wives, then spreading outward like a viral infection of cruelty. Someone actually applauded, as if Brandon had delivered a particularly clever toast. Victoria's laugh tinkled like breaking glass. "Oh, poor Brandon. Well, every family has its burdens. At least, Monica turned out presentable despite her background." "Barely," Brandon added, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You should see where he lives. Government housing, basically. Monica was embarrassed to bring me there." That was a lie. Monica had never brought him to my apartment. But the truth didn't matter when the performance was this good, when the audience was this eager to believe that money equaled worth. The wedding coordinator touched Brandon's elbow, reminding him about timing. He shrugged her off. "1 minute. I'm educating our guests about the family tree. The dying branch of it anyway." More laughter. Someone at table 3, a state senator I'd once held in contempt for ignoring a subpoena, actually took out his phone to record the moment. Patricia Morse, the federal prosecutor, wasn't laughing. She sat at her table, watching me with the careful attention of someone who recognized a storm building before the first thunder. I stood slowly. The motion drew more attention. Whispers rippled outward from table 12. "That's him, the father, the one Brandon was talking about." 23 steps to reach the Carters. I counted each one, using the rhythm to control my breathing. My reflection in the ballroom mirrors showed a man in a modest navy suit walking with deliberate calm. But inside, 30 years of judicial restraint fought against primal fury. The crowd parted. Some guests stepped back instinctively, sensing something in my walk that didn't match Brandon's narrative of a mindless sheep. Others leaned in, phones ready, expecting either submission or a scene worthy of social media. Brandon's smirk widened with each step I took. "Here he comes, everyone. Probably wants to give a toast about government bonds or tax codes or whatever mindless drones think about." Richard Carter laughed, a harsh bark that I recognized from audio recordings in evidence. The same laugh captured on FBI surveillance when he joked about idiots who think building codes matter. At 15 steps, Monica appeared in the doorway. Her wedding dress caught the light like a vision, but her face had gone pale. Sarah, her bridesmaid, held her arm, whispering urgently. Monica's eyes found mine, pleading. At 20 steps, the orchestra stopped playing. The conductor, confused by the shift in atmosphere, looked between Brandon and me like a child watching parents fight. At 23 steps, I stood 3 feet from the Carter family, close enough to see the Botox preventing Victoria's complete expression of disdain, close enough to smell Richard's cologne, something expensive that couldn't mask the scent of corruption I'd learned to recognize in 30 years of court proceedings. Brandon's smirk remained, but something flickered in his eyes. This close, without an audience's laughter for armor, he looked like what he was, a bully realizing his victim wasn't following the script. "Well," Brandon said, playing to the crowd, "did you come to thank us for letting you attend? Or maybe ask for a loan? I know government salaries are basically minimum wage for people with real jobs." Victoria's laugh had died halfway through. This close, She could see my expression, could see that whatever she'd expected from Monica's father, civility, anger, embarrassment, wasn't what stood before her. Richard stepped forward, trying to salvage his son's performance. "Brandon, let's not keep our guests waiting. The ceremony—" "No, Dad, let him speak." Brandon's voice cracked slightly. "Monica's father clearly has something to say. Don't you, Chief? Some wisdom from your vast experience filing paperwork?" The ballroom held its breath. 300 guests waited for my response. Monica stood frozen in the doorway, her fairy tale wedding becoming something else entirely. I straightened my tie, a simple gesture that somehow made Brandon step back. When I spoke, my voice carried the same authority I used when calling a courtroom to order, though none of them would recognize it. "You're right, Brandon. I do have something to say." The silence was complete now. Even the waitstaff had stopped moving, silver trays held like shields. "But not here, not now." I looked past him to Monica. "This is my daughter's day." "Running away?" Brandon regained his smirk. "Typical government worker. All talk, no action." I turned back to him, and whatever he saw in my face made him take another step back. His heel caught on his mother's dress, tearing the hem with a sound that seemed to echo in the silence. "No," I said quietly. "I'm choosing my moment. There's a difference." The wedding coordinator seized the opening. "Places, everyone. The ceremony is beginning." But nobody moved. The entire ballroom remained frozen, watching the space between Brandon and me, like it was a bomb that might explode. Victoria found her voice first. "This is ridiculous. Richard, tell them to start the music." Richard's face had gone grey. Maybe it was my expression. Maybe it was the way Patricia Morse was now standing at her table, recognition dawning on her features. Or maybe it was instinct, the same survival mechanism that had helped him avoid justice for so long, warning him that something had shifted, that the sheep had teeth. Victoria's laugh caught in her throat like a fishbone. Her manicured hand clutched Richard's sleeve, nails digging through the Italian wool. Something had shifted in her expression, the superiority melting into uncertainty, then crystallizing into something close to fear. Her eyes narrowed, studying my face with the intensity of someone trying to place a half-remembered dream. The champagne flute in her other hand trembled, sending golden ripples through the crystal. "Richard," she whispered, but her husband was still riding the high of public humiliation. "So you're Monica's father?" Richard extended his hand with the casual arrogance of someone used to others, jumping at his acknowledgement. "Well, at least she's pretty. Sometimes genetics skip a generation." More laughter from their circle. Brandon checked his Rolex, a theatrical gesture meant to show how much of his valuable time this was wasting. "Marcus Washington," I said, keeping my hands at my sides. Victoria's intake of breath was sharp enough to cut glass. Her clutch fell open, and she fumbled for her phone with fingers that suddenly wouldn't cooperate. The device slipped, caught, nearly dropped again. "Richard, that's—" Her voice had gone up an octave. "What? Speak up, Vic. We're keeping everyone waiting." Richard's confidence hadn't wavered yet. Why would it? He'd spent decades in rooms where his word was law, his jokes were hilarious, and his money made him untouchable. The string quartet had stopped mid-song, the violinist's bow frozen in air. 200 guests had formed a natural amphitheater around us, their collective silence more deafening than their earlier laughter. Whispers started at the edges. "What's happening? Is that the bride's father? Why did the music stop?" Victoria's phone screen glowed as she searched frantically. Her thumb scrolled, stopped, scrolled again, then she found it. Her face went from pale to translucent, like expensive china held up to harsh light. Brandon shifted impatiently. "Mom, seriously, what's the drama? The photographer's waiting." From the direction of the bridal suite came the distinctive click of heels on marble. Monica approaching, her wedding dress rustling like whispered warnings. The crowd parted to let her through, but she hadn't reached us yet. Couldn't see her mother-in-law-to-be staring at a phone screen like it held a death warrant. "Mrs. Carter?" I kept my voice level, professional, the same tone I used when calling court to order. "Is there a problem?" She looked up from the phone to my face, back to the phone, up again. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. The wedding coordinator hovered nearby, clipboard clutched like a life preserver, clearly debating whether to intervene. Richard's smile was beginning to fracture at the edges. "Victoria, what are you—" She turned the phone toward him. Even from 3 feet away, I could see my official portrait on the New Jersey Supreme Court website. The headline below it read, "Chief Justice Washington presides over historic corruption case." The champagne flute slipped from Victoria's other hand. It shattered on the marble floor with a sound like applause, golden liquid spreading across white stone like evidence at a crime scene. A waiter rushed forward with towels, but Richard held up a hand. "Stop," his eyes fixed on that small screen. "The news?" Victoria's whisper carried in the silence. The Chief Justice, Patricia Morse, the federal prosecutor, had stood up at her table. I saw the exact moment recognition dawned on her face, the slight widening of eyes, the unconscious step backward. She knew, and if she knew, others would too. The governor's aide at table 2 was already whispering urgently into his phone. The state senator at table 3 had gone rigid in his chair. Monica's voice preceded her appearance. "Dad, what's going on? Brandon?" But Brandon wasn't looking at his bride anymore. He was watching his parents' faces transform from arrogance to something he'd never seen before. Fear. Real, bone-deep fear. The kind that comes when you realize the sheep you've been mocking has been the wolf all along, patiently documenting every insult, every crime, every moment of hubris. Victoria's phone screen reflected in her eyes as she stared at my official portrait. The caption beneath it would have been visible even from where Richard stood. Chief Justice Marcus Washington, appointed 2019, presiding over State versus Carter construction. Victoria's words came in fragments, like a confession being dragged out in court. "You're not a clerk. You're not a paper pusher. The wedding coordinator stepped forward, desperate to salvage the timeline. "Mr. Carter, should we proceed with the ceremony?" Nobody answered her. The entire ballroom held its breath. 300 guests, $40,000 in flowers, a string quartet worth $5,000 for the evening, all frozen, waiting for Victoria Carter to finish a sentence that would change everything. Her phone clattered to the floor beside the champagne glass. On the screen, my official portrait stared up at the ceiling, judge's robes dark against the marble, while above it I stood in my modest navy suit, watching the Carter's world begin its slow collapse. Victoria's mouth formed words that wouldn't come, her lips shaping syllables like a silent movie actress in a talking picture world. The words finally escaped Victoria's lips like prisoners breaking free. "Your Chief Justice Washington." The silence that followed could have been measured in heartbeats. Mine, steady from years of maintaining composure in chaotic courtrooms. Richard's, visible in the pulse jumping at his throat. Victoria's, fluttering in the hollow of her neck like a trapped bird. "Yes, Mrs. Carter," I confirmed, my voice carrying the same authority I used when delivering verdicts. The revelation rippled outward through the crowd in visible waves. Gasps from the government officials who suddenly understood the implications. Nervous laughter from those who thought it might be a joke. Confused murmurs from distant relatives who didn't grasp the significance. "The one presiding over—" Victoria couldn't finish. "Your fraud case?" "Yes." I let each word land with precision. "I recognized you immediately. Your husband too. The photographs in the case file are quite comprehensive." Richard's hand moved to his tie, loosening it with fingers that had developed a tremor. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the ballroom's aggressive air conditioning. His eyes darted between me and the exit, calculating distances, possibilities, escape routes that didn't exist. "We had no idea," he said, his voice cracking like a teenager's. "Monica never said. She doesn't know my caseload. Judicial ethics prevent me from discussing active cases with family." I paused, letting him process that, though I suppose that's about to become complicated. Brandon's confusion had reached critical mass. "What's everyone talking about? What case?" "Dad?" Monica had finally pushed through the crowd, her wedding dress train carried by 2 bridesmaids who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. "Dad? What's happening? Why is everyone—" She stopped when she saw her future in-laws' faces. Victoria had aged 10 years in 10 seconds. Richard looked like a man watching his life's work burn while holding an empty fire extinguisher. "Your father," Victoria's voice was hollow, "is Chief Justice Marcus Washington." Monica's expression cycled through confusion, disbelief, and finally a dawning horror as pieces clicked into place. "Chief Justice, Dad? You said you worked in the courts." "I do work in the courts." I kept my tone mild. "I run them." Carter's lawyer, I recognized him from the defense filings, had gone the color of spoiled milk. He was already on his phone, probably calling his senior partners, definitely calculating billable hours for the crisis management that would follow. 50 million in fraudulent contracts, I continued, addressing Richard but speaking loud enough for the nearer tables to hear. Delaware shell companies, inflated invoices for highway projects that were never completed to specification. Richard's hands shook visibly now. "You can't. You have to recuse yourself." I should have, the moment I realized the connection, but that was 6 weeks ago. The preliminary hearing is in July. I straightened my tie, the one from Linda's funeral, as Monica had mentioned. "Tell me, Mr. Carter, when you were having your son mock me for being a mindless sheep, did it occur to you to ask what kind of work I actually did?" Brandon finally found his voice. "This is insane. You're saying my dad, that our company—" He looked between his parents' guilty faces and my calm one. "Mom?" Victoria gripped the edge of the nearest table for support. Her designer dress had sweat stains spreading from the underarms, $1,000 fabric betraying her body's panic. "The FBI investigation findings are particularly damning," I said conversationally, as if discussing the weather. "The witness who died in that convenient car accident, James Torres, His deposition was recorded before his death. Video testimony is very compelling to juries. You're trying to destroy us. Richard's attempted anger came out as a whine. Because of some petty jealousy, I'm doing my job. The job you thought was beneath notice. The paper pushing you found so amusing. I looked at Brandon. Your father built an empire on stolen taxpayer funds. That school where the ceiling collapsed? Your company used substandard materials to save money. 3 children were hospitalized. Monica's hand covered her mouth. Brandon, is this true? Brandon looked at his parents, waiting for a denial that wasn't coming. His groomsmen had backed away, creating distance from contamination. The photographers had lowered their cameras. Some stories weren't meant for wedding albums. The engagement party, Monica said suddenly, her voice hollow. April 5th, all those politicians, they were all campaign contributors, I confirmed. Your future father-in-law is very generous with money that isn't his. Hotel security had moved closer, 3 guards in discreet positions around the ballroom's perimeter. They weren't sure what was happening, but they recognized the smell of scandal about to explode. Patricia Morse had made her way through the crowd. Judge Washington, she said formally, loud enough to confirm my identity to any remaining doubters. I didn't expect to see you here. My daughter's wedding, I replied. Though it seems we have a situation. Richard's eyes darted between Patricia and me. He recognized her now, the federal prosecutor who'd been building cases against corrupt contractors. The net was visible now, and he was already entangled. We should talk, Richard said desperately. Privately, there must be some arrangement. Mr. Carter, Patricia interrupted. I'd advise you not to complete that sentence. The wedding coordinator made one last attempt at salvage. Should we delay the ceremony? Nobody answered her. How do you proceed with a wedding when the groom's family has just discovered the bride's father will be sending them to prison? Victoria's knees buckled slightly. A groomsman caught her elbow, held her upright. Her eyes met mine across the distance, the same space where she'd laughed at the mindless sheep just minutes ago. Your Honor, she said, the title tasting like ash in her mouth. We didn't know. Ignorance, I replied, has never been a valid defense. Richard's eyes were still darting, still calculating. His hands gestured desperately, the wedding rings on his fingers catching the light like handcuffs waiting to be applied. Richard's grip on my elbow was desperate as he steered me through the service corridor, away from the collapsing wedding. His fingers pressed hard enough to bruise, the physical contact of a man who'd run out of subtle options. 10 minutes had passed since the revelation. The ballroom behind us churned with chaos. Monica crying, Brandon shouting, guests filming with phones despite security's attempts to stop them. Richard had grabbed me during the confusion, hissing, "We need to talk," with breath that smelled of fear and champagne. The conference room he pushed me into was small, corporate, sterile, an oval table surrounded by leather chairs, certificates of hotel excellence on beige walls. Through the thin walls came muffled sounds of the celebration that wasn't celebrating anymore. Voices raised in confusion, heels clicking on marble as guests fled, the string quartet packing up their instruments. Richard locked the door behind us, the click of the deadbolt like a period at the end of a sentence. His hands shook as he reached into his jacket. Judge Washington, he began, attempting the reasonable tone of a man who still thought money could solve any problem. We're both intelligent men. What's your point? I stood by the window, keeping the table between us. This is all a misunderstanding. He pulled out a checkbook, not personal, I noticed, but from Carter Construction, company funds for company crimes, a matter that can be clarified. The fountain pen he produced was worth more than most people's monthly salary, platinum and gold, probably a gift from some grateful politician. His hand trembled as he uncapped it. $10 million, he said, writing as he spoke, a donation to your favorite charity, or retirement fund, or granddaughter's college fund, whenever Monica has children. You're attempting to bribe a judge. I'm attempting to solve a problem. The pen scratched across the check. 20 million. Think of Monica's happiness. Do you want her to start married life with her in-laws in prison? You've just added another felony to your charges. His desperation increased with each word I spoke. The pen moved faster, numbers growing larger. 30 million. Cash. Untraceable. Offshore accounts. You could retire tomorrow. I pulled out my phone, making sure he could see the recording app icon. The red dot blinked steadily, capturing every word. His face went gray. Turn that off. No. 40 million. He finished writing the check, tore it from the book, thrust it toward me. Take it and recuse yourself. Say you just discovered the connection. Nobody has to know about tonight. Everyone already knows. 50 million. The check fluttered between us like a white flag of surrender. That's more than you'll make in your entire career. I pushed his hand away. The check floated to the floor, landing face up. $50 million in desperate handwriting, signed by a man who'd built an empire on other people's money and thought he could buy his way out of justice. You don't understand. Richard's reasonable mask finally slipped completely. I know people who handle problems. Construction is a dangerous business. Accidents happen, equipment fails, buildings collapse. Are you threatening a judge? I'm explaining reality. He moved closer, invading my space, cologne mixing with flop sweat. Your daughter is marrying my son. We're going to be family. Families protect each other, or they destroy each other. Your choice. A knock at the door interrupted him. Mr. Carter, the ceremony? Richard ignored it, his eyes locked on mine. I built this company from nothing. 30 years of work, 300 employees. Do you know what happens to them if Carter Construction fails? They find jobs with honest companies. There are no honest companies? His control shattered completely. Everyone does it. Every contractor, every builder, we all play the game. I just played it better. And now you want to destroy me because what? Because my son laughed at your suit? Your son is irrelevant. The evidence against you isn't. Another knock, more urgent. Mr. Carter, your wife is asking for you. Richard grabbed my arm again. 75 million. My entire liquid assets. Everything I can access without board approval. No. 100 million. I'll sell everything. The house, the cars, the boat. Monica will never want for anything. Monica will never want you in her life once she knows the truth. The checkbook fell from his hands, pages scattering across the floor like evidence at a crime scene. Each blank check represented another potential crime, another attempt to buy what couldn't be purchased. You've destroyed everything, he said, his voice hollow. My son's wedding, my family's reputation, everything I built. You destroyed it yourself. I'm just holding up the mirror. I walked to the door, my hand on the knob. Richard made one last desperate grab, his fingers clutching at my jacket. Please, I'm begging you. As a father, think of the children, Monica and Brandon. Don't destroy their lives for our mistakes. Your mistakes destroyed 3 children's lives when that school ceiling collapsed. Their parents begged too. Did you listen? I turned the knob. The door opened to reveal hotel security, Patricia Morse, and 2 FBI agents she'd apparently called during the chaos. They looked past me to Richard, to the scattered checks on the floor, to the exposed checkbook with its damning evidence. Mr. Carter, Patricia said formally, we need to discuss what just happened in this room. Richard's checkbook lay open on the floor, pages scattered like the promises he'd made to contractors, politicians, inspectors, everyone he'd bought over the years. The fountain pen had rolled under the table, its gold surface catching the light like the handcuffs that would soon replace the wedding rings on his wrists. Behind us, through the walls, came the sound of the wedding that would never happen. Monica's sobs, Brandon's shouts, and the whispers of 300 guests who'd witnessed the exact moment when the sheep revealed its teeth. The ballroom doors swung open to chaos, overturned champagne flutes, wedding guests clustered in gossiping circles, and Monica's mascara streaking down her cheeks like evidence of a crime I hadn't meant to commit. 20 minutes had passed since Richard's desperate bribery attempt. The FBI agents had taken him for questioning in another room, though Patricia Morse assured me he'd be released after giving a statement. The wedding obviously was finished. 200 guests milled about like survivors of a natural disaster. Some were leaving, gathering purses and jackets with the embarrassed efficiency of people fleeing scandal. Others lingered, phones out, documenting the Carter family's public destruction for social media. The wedding cake stood untouched on its table, 3 tiers of fondant perfection mocking the chaos around it. The string quartet had packed their instruments, leaving behind empty music stands like skeletons. In the corner, a heated argument had erupted. Richard had returned, his face grey but his voice sharp as he cornered Brandon against a pillar. Victoria stood beside them, her ruined makeup making her look like a tragedy mask. You complete fool, Richard's voice carried across the ballroom. Do you understand what you've done? I didn't do anything. Brandon's designer tuxedo was rumpled now, his boutonniere crooked. He's just some courthouse clerk. You said so yourself. Victoria grabbed her son's shoulders. He's the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of New Jersey. You ignorant child, the man who'll decide our case. The information seemed to penetrate Brandon's skull with visible difficulty. His eyes widened, narrowed, then widened again as synapses finally fired. But Monica said he worked in the courts. She never said, because you never asked. Richard's hand slammed against the pillar. You were too busy mocking his suit, calling him names, treating him like garbage while every word was being recorded by half the government officials in the state. Brandon's gaze swept the ballroom, finally noticing how many phones were pointed in his direction. The reality of viral humiliation was dawning on his generation's social media brain. You apologize to him, Victoria commanded. Right now. Mom, that's insane. Richard grabbed his son's lapels. Everything we built, everything we have, depends on that man's decision. You humiliated him publicly. You fix it publicly. Dad, you can't be serious. Do it. Victoria's voice cracked like a whip. Or lose everything. The house, the cars, your trust fund, All of it goes if we lose this case. Brandon looked between his parents' desperate faces. For perhaps the first time in his privileged life, he was facing consequences that money couldn't erase. His shoulders sagged in defeat. 15 steps separated him from where I stood near the entrance, talking with Patricia Morse about the recording I'd made. I watched Brandon approach in my peripheral vision, each step smaller than the last, like a child approaching the principal's office. He stopped 3 feet away, his designer shoes scuffing the marble. Sweat stained his collar despite the air conditioning. His hands hung at his sides, clenching and unclenching. "Mr. Washington," he began, his voice barely audible. I turned to face him fully, crossing my arms, said nothing. Behind him, the remaining guests had formed a semicircle, phones raised, waiting for the next viral moment. Brandon's eyes darted to the floor, the ceiling, anywhere but my face. I apologize for my words earlier. Still, I said nothing. Let the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable, then painful. "I shouldn't have said those things," he continued, each word seemingly pulled from him with pliers. "About your job, your appearance. It was wrong." Monica had approached, her wedding dress train carried by Sarah. She stopped beside Brandon, mascara-streaked face pleading. But I kept my focus on him. "I'm sorry," Brandon mumbled, the words dying in the air between us. The ballroom held its breath. Government officials had their phones trained on us. Carter's former friends looked embarrassed by association. Monica's elderly aunts shook their heads in disappointment. Someone's teenage cousin was definitely live-streaming this to Instagram. I let Brandon's apology hang there, inadequate and insincere, like a bad check written on an overdrawn account. His parents watched from across the room, Victoria wringing her hands, Richard's jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscles jumping. "Is that all?" I finally asked, my voice carrying the same tone I used when dismissing insufficient legal arguments. Brandon flinched. No, what else do you want me to say? I don't want you to say anything. Your parents want you to apologize. There's a difference between words spoken from conscience and words spoken from consequence. His face flushed red. The man who'd called me a mindless sheep hours ago now stood before me like a scolded child. His humiliation broadcast to hundreds of phones. But it wasn't enough. Not nearly enough. Victoria's face was crumbling as she realized the apology wasn't working. That words alone wouldn't undo the damage. That sometimes even privilege had limits. Behind Brandon, the wedding that would never be continued to decay. The ice sculptures were melting. The flowers were wilting in the heat of scandal. The fairy tale had become a cautionary tale, and everyone was watching it unfold in real time. Brandon stood there, waiting for absolution I wouldn't grant, his inadequate apology echoing in the silence like the sound of a dynasty beginning to fall. Victoria's Louboutin heels clicked across marble as she crossed the 20 feet between us, each step smaller than the last. The crowd parted for her like she was contagious, their phones rising in anticipation of whatever desperate act was coming. Her designer dress, a $30,000 Versace creation she'd bragged about during cocktails, rustled with each movement. The pearls around her neck, family heirlooms she'd mentioned were worth more than most people's houses, swayed like prayer beads she'd forgotten how to use. 10 feet from me she stumbled, not from the heels or the champagne, but from the weight of what she was about to do. Richard started forward, then stopped, his face a mixture of horror and resignation. 5 feet, her hands were shaking visibly now. 3 feet, then Victoria Carter, society matron, wife of a millionaire, woman who'd laughed at the mindless sheep just an hour ago, dropped to her knees. The sound was audible. Designer kneecaps meeting Italian marble with a crack that echoed through the ballroom. Her dress pooled around her like spilled wealth. 100 phones rose higher, capturing every second of her degradation. "Sir, please forgive us!" The words exploded from her throat, raw and desperate. Her manicured hands reached out, grabbing my sleeve with the desperation of someone drowning in consequences. "We didn't know who you were." Tears destroyed her $300 makeup job, sending rivers of mascara down cheeks that had been contoured to perfection. "If we'd known, if Brandon had known—" "Mom, get up!" Brandon's voice cracked with embarrassment, but Victoria wasn't listening. "Please, for Monica's sake!" Her fingers clutched tighter, pulling at my jacket. "She loves Brandon. Don't destroy their happiness because of our stupidity." The pearls swung wildly as she sobbed, catching the light like tiny cameras documenting her humiliation. Someone whispered, "Is that really Mrs. Carter?" Another voice, "On her knees!" The whispers spread like wildfire through the assembled guests. "I'm begging you." The words came between gasps. "We'll do anything you want. Just please don't destroy my family." Monica ran forward, her wedding dress train catching on chairs, tearing with a sound like dreams ripping. "Mrs. Carter, please get up." Please! But Victoria remained on her knees, a woman worth millions groveling on cold marble, her dignity pooling around her like the designer dress she'd probably never wear again. Hotel security had moved closer, uncertain whether to intervene. The wedding planner was on her phone, probably calling her supervisor, trying to explain how a high society wedding had become a public breakdown. We were wrong, Victoria's sobs echoed off the ballroom walls. Brandon was wrong. We raised him wrong. But please, please show mercy. Richard stood frozen, watching his wife debase herself for their future. His hands hung at his sides, useless as the checkbook that had failed him earlier. Brandon looked like he might vomit, his face green beneath the fake tan. I reached down, my hand gentle but firm on Victoria's shoulder. This isn't the place, Mrs. Carter. She looked up at me, face destroyed, makeup running in black rivers, eyes red and swollen. Then where? Tell me where to beg and I'll do it. Stand up, now. It took Monica and Sarah both to help her rise. Victoria's knees were red where they'd pressed against the marble, visible through the tears in her stockings. She swayed on her feet, thousands of dollars of designer clothing now looking like expensive rags. I turned to Monica. Her face was a battlefield of emotions. Embarrassment, confusion, love, disappointment, all warring for dominance. I wish you happiness, I told her, meaning it despite everything. Whatever form that takes. Then I walked toward the exit. The crowd parted again, but differently this time, with the respect reserved for someone who'd maintained dignity while others lost theirs. Phones tracked my movement, but I didn't care. Let them record. Let them see that justice doesn't kneel, doesn't beg, doesn't compromise its principles for tears or money or public pressure. Dad, Monica called after me, her voice broken. Dad, please. I paused at the door, looking back once at the destroyed reception. The ice sculptures had melted into abstract shapes. The cake stood untouched, a monument to celebration that wouldn't happen. Victoria was being helped to a chair, her sobs still audible. Brandon stood frozen, his world recalibrating around the realization that actions had consequences money couldn't erase. And Monica, my daughter in her beautiful dress, surrounded by the wreckage of her fairy tale, looked at me with eyes that asked questions I couldn't answer yet. Not until she was ready to hear that sometimes love wasn't enough, that sometimes the people we choose reveal themselves through their treatment of others, that sometimes a father's greatest gift to his daughter is showing her what respect looks like, even when it's painful. The exit door was heavy, but it opened easily under my hand. The corridor beyond was dark, quiet, a blessed relief from the chaos behind. As the door closed, the last thing I heard was Victoria Carter's broken sobbing, the sound of privilege discovering its limits. 10 weeks later, July 28th, the courtroom's air conditioning fought against the summer heat and the packed gallery's anticipation. I sat in my judicial robes, the weight of them familiar as breathing, looking down at a case that had consumed my thoughts since that ruined wedding in May. The courtroom was modern, imposing, designed to remind everyone that justice was serious business. Richard and Victoria Carter sat at the defendant's table with their team of expensive lawyers. Brandon was there too, in the gallery's first row, his cockiness replaced by something quieter. Monica was absent. Her choice, Patricia Morse had told me. She couldn't watch her father sentence her in-laws. Media presence was heavy but controlled. Court officers kept them in designated areas, their cameras capturing every moment of the Carter Empire's reckoning. The evidence had been presented over 3 days. Documents, testimonies, recordings. The FBI's case was thorough, professional, undeniable. Will the defendants please rise? Richard stood slowly, his orange jumpsuit a far cry from his Italian suits. Victoria rose beside him, hands clasped, wearing the kind of simple dress you'd find at Target, her designer wardrobe seized as potential criminal assets. The court finds the defendants guilty on all charges, my voice carried clearly through the room. Fraud against the United States government, conspiracy to defraud, submission of false claims. Victoria's shoulders shook, but she remained standing. Richard's jaw was set, accepting what he'd known was coming since May. The court imposes a fine of $30 million, to be paid in full within 6 months. I paused, letting the number sink in. Additionally, 5 years probation, no jail time, in consideration of your cooperation with authorities and lack of prior criminal history. Gasps from the gallery. They'd expected prison, but I'd seen enough to know that the loss of everything they'd built would be punishment enough. The company would be dissolved. Their reputation was destroyed. They'd live the rest of their lives as cautionary tales. We accept responsibility, Your Honor, Richard said, his voice steady, and we thank the court for its fairness. Court is adjourned. The gavel came down with finality. 2 weeks passed in routine. Other cases, other decisions, life returning to its rhythm. Monica had called twice, but I hadn't answered. Not yet. The news coverage had died down, replaced by newer scandals. The wedding venue had apparently waived their cancellation fees, citing extraordinary circumstances. August 15th found me in a small cafe in Trenton, reading the newspaper over coffee. A story about infrastructure funding caught my eye. Legitimate contractors getting the jobs Carter Construction had once stolen. Progress. The bell above the door chimed. I looked up from habit and froze. Richard and Victoria Carter stood in the entrance, looking like different people. He wore a simple polo shirt and khakis. She was in jeans and a modest blouse. They saw me, hesitated. Then Richard walked over. "Judge Washington, may I? It's a free country." They sat carefully, like they were afraid of taking up too much space. Victoria's hands were bare of jewelry, except for her wedding ring. Richard's Rolex had been replaced by a Timex. "You were fair," Richard said without preamble. "More than fair. Another judge might have given us prison time. You cooperated fully. That matters. We were wrong about everything." The words came steadily, rehearsed maybe, but genuine. "Brandon's immaturity, our arrogance, the way we treated people, treated you. We've learned our lesson." Victoria leaned forward. "Monica's a good woman. You raised her right. We didn't deserve her." "How are they?" I asked, surprising myself. "Still married," Victoria said. "Brandon's working now. Really working. Construction, but honest. Union job. He's learning what it means to earn rather than take. Monica's at a new firm," Richard added, specializing in ethics compliance. "She says she learned from the best teacher, even if the lesson was painful." We sat in silence for a moment. Three people who'd collided violently, now sharing space peacefully. Richard extended his hand across the table. "The past is past. We'd like to try again if you're willing. For Monica's sake." I looked at his hand, no longer manicured, calloused now from actual work. This was a different man from the one who'd tried to bribe me. Prison hadn't rehabilitated him. Consequences had. I shook his hand firmly. "Be good to her." "We will," Victoria said. "We promise." They left shortly after, Richard holding the door for Victoria, then for an elderly woman entering behind them. Small courtesies that would have been beneath them before. I returned to my newspaper, coffee cooling, thinking about justice and redemption. Another headline caught my eye. A new corruption case, another contractor thinking they were above the law. I circled the defendant's name with my pen, already thinking about the case that would likely cross my desk. Outside, through the cafe window, I saw Richard and Victoria walking together, his arm around her shoulders, her head against his chest. They'd lost an empire but kept each other. Monica would call again soon, I knew. And this time, I'd answer. We'd talk about forgiveness, about family, about how sometimes the greatest act of love is holding people accountable for their actions. The coffee was cold now, but I didn't mind. Justice, I'd learned, was best served at exactly the right temperature, not with the heat of revenge, but with the cool precision of law. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, it ended not with destruction, but with the possibility of redemption. My phone buzzed. "Monica." This time I answered. "Hi, baby. Dad? Can we talk?" "Yes," I said, watching the Carters disappear around the corner, heading toward whatever future they'd build from the rubble of their past. "We can talk. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.